I'm Marco Aiello. I'm here with Marcus Bedinger. He's candidate for Dayton City Commissioner. He's been noticed by many organizations like the DSA. He's been endorsed by them. Um, he's been to show up for issue one. I'm here to ask him just a few policy questions related to what's going on with Ohio infrastructure and the budget, and also what's going to happen after issue one and abortion in the next election. You've grown up in the Dayton, the Trotwood area. Your parents worked here. Your dad was a union member and experienced a lot of the factories and moving out of Dayton, Ohio. So you've seen a lot of the economic fall of some of Dayton, of some of Dayton and the struggles of the citizens living here in Dayton. So what other experiences have you seen here in Dayton relating to homelessness or people losing their jobs in the city? What do you think is the future, just from your experience of Dayton?
So you're right that my dad was a union member. He worked at Delphi all while I was growing up. And then, as we Ohioans know, Daytonians know, we lost a lot of our manufacturing base, our auto manufacturing base, that is, um, which was really the center point of Dayton's economy and, I guess job center. And so after my dad lost his job, that comes with other things. He lost a car, he lost a house, and this was on my way to my freshman year of college. And so you have to think about, my parents trying to put me through college when all this is going on, the subprime mortgage loan crisis, people losing manufacturing jobs, and not being able to stay afloat after that. And that has been those experiences have informed my political consciousness from that moment until now. And it's kind of been, I've certainly, been on my feet sometimes and been doing okay, but my life has been this consistent economic struggle, right? Growing up essentially in poverty, trying to go to college while my dad just lost a job. My mom was not working. And so there's just been this through line in my life of economic struggle. And I know that is shared across the country. But because, manufacturing was such a big base in Dayton, that's the story of so many other
Mhm.
Daytonians. Our parents didn't necessarily need a college degree. They had good GM and Delphi jobs, and they raised us on that. They made a living, we made a way, and then that was gone. And I grew up a little bit. I lived in New York for a time, and I moved back during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, um, while everything was still quarantined. We were still shut down. And once we reopened, I saw really a tale of two cities in that downtown had seen so much investment that it almost looked like Brooklyn or Manhattan, where I just moved from. And then the neighborhoods that I grew up in looked like war zones. And so it says to me that, nearly 20 years ago when we lost those automotive jobs, about 15 years ago, I guess, when we lost all of those jobs, there was certainly struggle, but we have not clawed our way out of that as a city. A lot of that anguish and just economic despair still remains in Dayton, and in some cases has been exacerbated. So you asked, what I've seen in Dayton that might, be an example of this struggle. I was homeless myself. Now I did live in New York at the time,
Mhm.
um, but it was the case where my partner and I were both working people, full-time jobs with benefits, making over six figures together. And it still was not enough to pay our rent and our bills and, take care of a new baby. And that is the experience that is multiplied too many times across Dayton. And that they're working hard, sometimes multiple jobs, and it is still not enough. And so one of the things I want to do in this campaign is change the conversation from we need to invest downtown because it will eventually trickle out to all of the neighborhoods like mine in Roosevelt, where I live next door to an abandoned house that has been there for 20 years. And they continue that kind of proposition and that political plan to say that we'll invest $1.5 billion downtown, and then eventually, Roosevelt will see some, and Westwood and Residence Park will see some. And that's not the conversation we should be having when Dayton owes its citizens so much from decades ago when we lost jobs and lost homes and lost cars and, had to drop out of school. those crises have still not been addressed, and that to me is what is really unfair about rolling out the red carpet for new people and saying, hey, this is what we have to do to rebuild Dayton. When there are so many people here who needed Dayton rebuilt a long, long time ago. So that's a very long answer, and there are a lot of issues, but I hope I touched on what the spirit of this campaign is and the spirit of the challenges we face.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of, the city of Dayton investing only in downtown, and I do say we have like a big budget issue of how we budget. The police and fire department make up more than like almost 50% of the budget, while we got surrounding surrounding neighborhoods like on Salem Avenue where they don't really got a grocery store. They only have the Gem City Market, and like stuff like that creates food deserts. So
Mm-hmm.
when we have a budget that is invested, like we're only invest really much into the police department, the surrounding neighborhoods is just they're failing. You got, like you said, a lot of empty homes or just homes that could be repaired for homeless people. You got people on the streets just begging for money, and there's walk around being ignored. So that these are really big issues. So my question is, with the police department and the fire department being how big it is, like in most cities across the country, where a lot of it is just more than 30% of the budget, do you plan to address these issues about the police budget in Dayton? Like, do you plan to bring it up and help create policy around that?
Yeah, my hope is that first of all, when it comes to policing and criminal justice, that we fix the social contract that we are supposed to have between as citizens, with those in authority to police our neighborhoods and our communities. And so what that means to me is no matter what you receive from the budget, whether it's 1 cent or $10 million, you need to understand the contract that you are in with Daytonians. And that means that you respect Daytonians, you protect Daytonians, and you serve Daytonians. Your job is not to over police and harass, and abuse Daytonians. And so that is a conversation that I would like to have. So when we're talking about things like the red light cameras, and shot spotter and those kinds of things that are used to police a certain segment of this community, and while saying they're servicing another part. And so that is my main priority when it comes to policing. But of course, we have to discuss the budget. And so I spoke out months ago regarding the Fuses technology because, yes, while it was a state trial program, eventually we will have to pay for that if it's a program that we want to keep. And just a little background: Fuses is technology that will allow the police to access privately owned security cameras, and it's not like a 24-hour feed, but whenever they need access to that, they could go to get it, unless homeowners and business owners opt out. And so I thought, number one, we need to talk about how this will be used, and who it might affect disproportionately in a negative way. But number two, we need to talk about the costs, because police departments across the country find themselves receiving money from budgets hand over fist, and the policing a lot of times does not improve. And so I want to have a conversation about the budget that revolves around what is effective and what actually works to prevent crime, to solve crime, and keep that the conversation. And a lot of times we see things like Fuses technology and ShotSpotter, and we like to throw that money at police before we have a conversation about what it really means for our community. And so, yes, let's have a conversation about what we want policing to look like in Dayton, but then also let's have a conversation about cost and what is actually effective, and make sure we're not spending money on resources, or methods that have more negative effects than they do positive benefit.
Yeah, for me personally, a lot of the issues, like a lot of like one of the big issues is mine is the police. 2020 really woke up a lot of Americans, I feel like, of being educated on how the police system works, and it created a big debate. Even within the left, it was a small debate whether to abolish or reform. Um, and then you get the whole country to be like, no, it's not. It's the police are good, they're fine, or you're on the side of, we need to fix the system. So this
Mhm.
is like a real big issue for me, which with the budget, this leads into questions about infrastructure I have. In other cities like Los Angeles, um, although a failing public transportation and infrastructure system could be better, they have things like the Amtrak trains going across the county and the city. They have more bus lines. Do you think the city of Dayton could bring better transportation, like a nice like Amtrak train going helping people, go like travel across the city, or better bus lines? Do you think we could get way like better public transportation infrastructure? And if you do, what would you do if empowered?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And actually, before I get to the infrastructure question, I do want to say on policing that I don't fall into the camp of defund the police. I do think the police have a purpose and a mission that we should try to find balance on. Like my partner's car has been broken into twice. We need to be able to call the police about things. So I don't see a Dayton without cops, but I do see a Dayton where we have just much more critical conversations about what policing means and how we're spending that money that we give to police. And I want to say that when it comes to our fire department, we have an entire fire station that is closed down right now. And so
Mhm.
it might seem like the fire station gets a ton of money, but they actually don't have enough and they're really understaffed. And I live on a street where a house just a couple months ago burnt to the ground. And, it was close enough that I could smell the smoke in our house and it woke us up. And so, when it comes to fire safety, to me, that's a much more holistic conversation about public safety because these houses are burning down and there are people in them. And so the conversation about public safety can't always be about police. We have to make sure our firefighters have adequate resources. Now, on infrastructure, you mentioned Amtrak. That is obviously a federal,
Mhm.
program, and one of the key things that we have to do across Ohio is work in collaboration with the state and federal government to
Yeah.
bring Amtrak to Ohio in a really pivotal way, that could change our workforce, have people commuting to cities like Chicago or Indianapolis in much less time. And I think that's a real conversation to have about the future of public transportation. Now, on a local level, I have seen RTA in a number of iterations. And right now, it is a real struggle. Of course, coming out of COVID, they are pretty understaffed, and so they've had to cut back on routes. But RTA is honestly a pretty decent
Yeah.
public transit service. Now, I would like to see improvements. I would like to see expansions. When you're on the west side, you don't want to have to wait an hour. For a bus to get out to one of the suburbs because that's where a lot of people are going for work. Obviously, there's not a ton of jobs in the city unless you work for the city or the airport,
Mhm.
or care source, so only a couple of few big employers in Dayton. And so a lot of us are working out in the suburbs. And I would like to see much more connectivity in public transport, but I understand the challenges in terms of budget, in terms of
Mhm.
understaffing, due to COVID and, people not wanting to drive buses with a mass amount of people. I get it.
Yeah.
But I would love to see an RTA that looked how it did a couple years ago with more routes, more frequent stops. And then, of course, we can talk about the stations and making them more comfortable and more dignified than having people, standing on the corner with bags and children, having seats at all of the bus stops. So, you know, plenty to talk about in terms of vision for public transit.
Yeah.
And I think, with three votes for that kind of vision on the city commission, we could really get some things done. It won't happen overnight, but we can
Yeah.
definitely change the conversation about what's happening.
Because I'm out in Los Angeles for school right now, and there we have like the metro train and a lot of like buses everywhere. It's more robust than Dayton, but like it's almost the population of Ohio and just one county. So there's a
Hmm.
need, and it's not as good as it should be for the population, but it is a lot better. And I do see a nice future of Dayton having things like that. And it's a good start of having a train going across city. So I think those are pretty good, and Dayton should find a way to invest into those. The next thing that I think is a really big issue for Dayton, and you see it everywhere on the streets. People have the different opinions on it, which is our homelessness issue, which is a growing issue for just all of America. If you go to you go to Smithville and you have like Smithville and it's on the entrance to the freeway, you see people having those signs up, homelessness, and you travel around and see all these empty homes and they could be repaired, and you wonder what's the city doing? Why aren't they helping these people? There's all these empty homes that could be repaired and you could put homeless people in them. What is your take on that? And do you support any policy that would mass try to house these people and help them with social work and help them with drug issues, because a lot of these homeless people, they won't even stay in their shelters because they got pets, but the shelter won't let them take it in, or they fear their stuff being stolen. So do you have plans to get these people, any of them have drug issues, on rehab and to house them?
Yeah, so what I would like to see is our city connect people to resources just across the board. I used to work in constituent services, and to me, a big part of government and a big part of government responsiveness is answering the call when people are in crisis. And so homelessness, of course, is a crisis. When you don't have a home, the issues start to pile up on you. And like I said, I've been here. I went through the shelter system. It was me, my pregnant partner at the time, and our newborn.
Mhm.
And that shelter system was such that every 10 days we had to move to a new shelter until we got a permanent placement. And if we, like I said, we were working throughout this time, and so it was a logistical nightmare. Trying while getting help, it was still so difficult just to stay afloat. And so, with that experience and that I guess unique insight into the challenge of homelessness, I have a lot of ideas about intake centers and how they work, about the growing our stock of affordable housing.
Mhm.
Like I have mentioned that I used to work for Congresswoman
Yeah.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who
Mhm.
did a lot of great work to repeal the Faircloth Amendment, which said that we could not build new public housing anywhere across the country. They just put a ban on it, no money for new low-income housing. And she worked hard to repeal that amendment. Now they have not allocated any money for new public housing, but once again, that's an issue where I hope to work collaboratively to get some funds for low income housing here in Dayton. Now, we lost a lot of our housing stock in the tornado. A lot of our housing stock is crumbling, but to your point, some of it can be fixed. And I think in situations where the city is holding on to properties that are not being bought, they could be rehabilitated sooner
Mhm.
and used for an interim purpose in terms of housing our transient population. And you know, the other part of homelessness, though, is jobs and incomes, because there's a reason people cannot maintain housing. It is
Yeah.
more expensive than it's ever been, and it's only getting more and more expensive. And downtown we have six-figure to $1 million condos, and we don't have enough housing for the people who live in Dayton.
Yeah.
And that's
Uh,
just a really sad proposition. And it's a sad place to be to say that this city is thriving and growing, but there are so many people who are unhoused. And so, yes, I will do a lot of work, as much as I can from the city commission to bring more low income housing, to connect our unhoused population with resources that, like you said, get them drug treatment, get them mental health treatment, connect them to workforce rehabilitation, childcare, and job and family services, the whole nine. And it needs to be comprehensive, because when you lose your house, you lose so much. Sometimes it's you don't even have transportation to go look for a job, or to make it to that job interview. And so it takes caseworkers, it takes a comprehensive plan to get people out of this situation, because what you can do is put somebody in a house and they still don't have a job, or they still don't have a way to work if they have a job, or they still don't have money for food. And so the issues still start to mount on each other, and you haven't actually made the person whole by giving them a home. And that's what we want to do. We don't just want to put people in houses, we want whole, thriving Daytonians. And so that's my vision, and that's my hope for city commission.
yeah, it's a good vision, because I've grown up in Dayton, even although living in Los Angeles right now. I've When I grown up in Dayton, I've seen all these issues just growing up, seen all the empty houses, I've seen people on the streets. Although I lived in, the people call like the good parts, of Dayton. I've still seen these issues just driving around. I've lived everywhere in the Dayton area. I lived in Riverside, although it's not in control of the city of Dayton. I've lived there. I lived in Miamisburg. I've seen all the issues. I do have some just Ohio politics questions to ask pertaining to like issue one and the state secretary. Um, we all know Frank LaRose is the state secretary. He's out campaigning. He's running for uh Congress. But he still is secretary as of now. During the issue one, he has been seen out campaigning people will vote yes on that. Which people bring up the question of, is that breaking the Hatch Act of the Federal Hatch Act of 1939, where anything that is federal funds allocated, these Congress people cannot go out and campaign for issues like that, and knowing that the issue won the election was, well, like $20 million of taxpayer money went into that. So do you think the state secretary was breaking the Federal Hatch Act of 1939, or do you know anything about that?
I do know about the Hatch Act. Now, I don't know if it applies to politicians that are not
Uh,
in federal office. It
it
applies to Ohio State politicians as
it
well.
applies to state and local. So
Okay,
this, but except it don't apply to the mayor, president, VP, lieutenant governor, or the governor. It just
okay. So
applies to
in that case,
whatever.
he was certainly in violation of the Hatch Act. I
Yeah,
mean, he was campaigning on the taxpayer dime for sure. And now there are even more questions because he's moved his campaign office to his official office, or vice his official office to his
yeah.
campaign office, which is just scummy kind of stuff. But it's Ohio Republicans we're talking about here, who is one of the most corrupt state parties,
Mhm.
Democrat or Republican, in our country. So Frank LaRose is part and parcel of Ohio Republican
Republican, yeah.
Party. He's corrupt as most of them are. I can't speak for all of them, but our Ohio House was recently washed clean, of corruption.
Hmm.
So it doesn't surprise me what he's doing. It is a disservice to democracy, also part and parcel of our national Republican Party to attack our democracy. Question elections, question elected officials, question election workers. So it's no surprise and it's disappointing. But I think it's important to focus on the positive with Frank LaRose, and it's that he's a loser. He tried very, very hard to pass issue one, and we batted that down. And I think we'll see a similar, if not increased, turnout for protecting abortion. So
Yeah,
I'm excited, and we'll let him do what he does. I don't think he's going to beat Sherrod Brown. So we're going to do a lot of great work around his reelection, and I think we'll be fine.
yeah. Many people say issue one was just helping protect abortion itself. That amendment to the Constitution, Republicans admittedly tried to use it to, we're going to use it to block abortion off ballots and make sure people just have a hard time amending, like putting abortion in Ohio's Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we can get people to go out and vote for that next month. Um,
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. But then I don't want people to lose sight of what Ohio Republicans are trying to do, because it wasn't just abortion. They used abortion. So I said this on my social media that the Republicans using abortion to get people to pass issue one is like the creepy guy using candy to lure kids. Like, it's the ultimate goal is not to give the child a snack, right?
yeah,
There's something else in mind. It's a little more nefarious than that. And so using abortion was just the low-hanging fruit. But there are things like qualified immunity, that'll be coming up, on the minimum wage that'll be coming up, that they would like to block that as well. And we want to protect our right to go to the ballot box and say we can amend our Constitution with a voter voice, and not having our hands tied and allowing our corrupt Ohio Republican Party to be the only ones who can amend our state constitution. So don't lose sight of the ball. There are issues coming up where we will likely have to fight back issue one, or it might not be issue one, but that similar issue again.
yeah, because just the Democratic Party overall, I see is going through some troubles. People have lost faith in the Democratic Party the past 4 years under Biden. The Democratic Party seems like they have no backbone. They always concede to the Republicans. Feel like even on the federal level, even in Ohio, they just let Republicans rip into their bills and laws and just gut things. Like you see with Biden, he pretty much gave them just gave them away the ending, like starting payments up again. He gave that to Republicans. They gutted social programs. What do you think is the future of the Democratic Party? Do you think that the Democrats should grow more of a backbone and be tougher on Republicans, because people are losing faith in them, and they're just seeing like, oh, Trump, add more money under Trump, I'm gonna vote for him.
Yeah, so you're right in that people are losing faith in both parties.
Hmm.
This problem is not unique to Democrats. I think you'll see, absent Trump, a lot of people do not trust the Republican Party.
Hmm.
Now, I'm a Bernie Sanders guy. I'm a progressive at heart, but I will defend Joe Biden a little bit and say that if you would have asked me when I felt forced to vote for him, if he would have entered office and spent about $3 to $7 trillion, considering things like infrastructure, the COVID relief bill, and there's some other legislation that's passed, but he's spent a lot of money, and
Hmm.
I would not have anticipated Mr. Centrist Joe Biden coming in and putting a lot of stuff on the credit card that he did, and I will give him credit also for Build Back Better, because it was an ambitious program, and had it passed, he would easily have been our most progressive president in a number of generations. And so I do not begrudge him for trying, because he didn't have to. And he's Joe Biden. We know his history. I did not anticipate him coming in doing even what he did. But to your point, could we have fought harder for those kind of progressive priorities that were left out, those social programs that you mentioned? I believe we could have. I can't tell you what tactic would have worked for sure, but I know that we allowed the Republicans to mischaracterize what the Democrats were trying to do. But then we also have the problem of centrist Democrats who are really bullish about spending money on poor people. I mean, just to
Yeah.
be frank, and it is not in their politics, although they are in our party. And so we do have to contend with that. And so I'm the kind of person that believes, and this is why I'm running for office, that sometimes the solutions are at the ballot box. And nobody wants to hear that, because organizing is difficult, it's hard, it's not a guarantee. But if you want your ideas to win out, sometimes you just have to take it to the level of an election. And so, with people like our senators from Arizona and West Virginia, who have been, kind of consistent bulwarks against progressive policy and progressive or social programs, we need to get people like that out of office. So I look at people like Ruben Gallego in Arizona, who needs a couple bucks, to make sure he can have a strong race against Kirsten Sinema, and then the same in West Virginia. Now, I don't know who's running against Joe Manchin, but you know we those are the people we need to get out of office, because they are standing in the way. It's not Joe Biden. He put his program out there, and I know he would have loved to put his signature on Build Back Better. I know it, because who wouldn't want to be the most progressive president probably since Teddy Roosevelt, had he signed that piece of legislation. So, but it's you have to contend with the people who are in Congress, and they have their certain powers and they have their votes, and you're not always guaranteed those things. So, I think Biden did the best he could. I've read some reporting um, that says he put a lot of pressure on those two senators, and they just didn't bite. And so that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. Now, as it relates to the future of the Democratic Party, I already have a bit of an issue, because I see a president who is old,
Yeah.
just to be frank. And while he is not the oldest person in Washington, D.C., we have episodes like Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein who are not shining the best light on these seasoned politicians we have in office. So even though Joe Biden is not in the worst of his physical faculties, we keep getting these examples of how these old people in Congress are having issues, cognitive issues, physical issues. And so with his election and people saying, oh, well, is he too old? Is he too old? Is he too old? It says to me that you need to be building real excitement around your reelection, because people have questions. And so to me, that turns to policy. And I don't currently see the policies coming out that might excite an actual reelection. Now, I know there's a tendency to kind of suck up all the oxygen with Trump and say, we have to protect this country from Trump, and look how much I did in the past 4 years. But I don't think that's going to be enough to win reelection. So I'm concerned that the Democratic Party is not as agenda focused as it should be, as people are paying more than ever for groceries, for gas, for rent, for utilities. It's just not adding up. And you keep hearing all of these positivities out of the Democratic Party about how great the economy is. But that is just not what I see as I'm knocking doors and campaigning for city commission. People are hurting still. People have questions about prices. People have questions about wages. People have questions about the availability of jobs. And so, it's just not squaring up. And I think he needs to get out there and talk to some more people and understand that we need a second term agenda out of you. And you're likely not going to do your best trying to ride on what you've done in the past 4 years, because it is not enough. So for the future of the Democratic Party, yes, they will need to get much tougher, much stronger, but they need an agenda as well.
Yeah, even you said that the centrist politicians, which yeah, many Americans do agree, even myself, that these centrist politicians aren't for the working class. They're not gonna do anything. Even Joe Biden, he stood against the railroad unions going on strike. AOC did that as well. Um, so what do you have to say to even the progressives standing against unions? Even like AOC, she, like I said before, she stood against the road unions, and she has the audacity to go to other like strikes and stand with them, even though she stood against a union herself.
I mean, I think you have these issues are separate.
Yeah,
If somebody supports a union, they support a union, and if they don't support a union, they don't support a union, right? So we have to look at what she has done, and she has stood by unions a lot more than she has behaved in the way that they did with the railway strike. Now, I think the railway strike is unique in that it scared politicians because that is one of the centers of our
yeah,
commerce, right? Had that shut down, we would have been in a world of economic hurt that I don't think our Congress was prepared to deal with split government. Republicans would have been far too happy to pounce on that situation, to allow it to linger, not fix it immediately because it looks painful for the Democrats. And so some of this stuff you have to think about politically, and that's sad because these are people's lives and livelihoods. But if the Democrats' hands are tied on everything because of this one issue, then there's nothing that can get
yeah,
done, right? So I think politically they saw a situation where if we do not figure out this strike situation, we end up in a situation where Republicans have the upper hand. They have control of a chamber of Congress, but then they will have the political upper hand in that this has created chaos, and they can exploit that. And we know how easy it is to message against the Democrats because, to your point, they are not always on top of things,
yeah,
message wise, politically, even if they're trying to do the most decent thing. And so I don't begrudge um, the actions on the railway strike as emblematic of people's politics or where they stand at heart. I take it as an example of how skittish politicians get when one issue could become a crisis.
yeah,
Now, Biden has on the back end done some things that have helped the railway union. It wasn't everything they asked for, but they have gotten some positive benefits out of future negotiations. And so to me, that's another example of, did they get everything they want? Did Biden do his best politically? Was he staunchly pro-union? The answer is absolutely not. But was the goal to get those workers something that they asked for? And I think that was always the goal. I think Bernie Sanders was, emphatic about that and within those negotiations in Congress, trying to get a little more out of those negotiations. And so it's one of those situations that from the outside looking in, it's simple to us, stand for the union, fist in the air, you know, you don't cross the picket line, that's it. For the people in office who having to make the decisions, it's a little murkier than that. And I like I said, I've worked for a member of Congress, so I've seen these negotiations up close. I've seen where your morals and your personal politics run up against systemic pressures, against institutional obstacles, and once again, I say these things rise to the level of elections. We need a lot more progressives in office. People talk about force the vote and Medicare for all. We need so many more progressives in office for that, to even be a real conversation, right? Because our Congress has never passed historic legislation like that on a 5-vote linchpin,
Yeah.
from within one party. Now, the ultimate array of votes might be, plus or minus 5 votes, a win or a loss. But a 5-person sect within a party driving a piece of just landmark legislation like that, I've not seen it. And so I just think we need a much stronger and larger segment of staunchly Medicare for all progressives in Congress. And then it has to pass the Senate. And so there's another
Yeah.
problem because we could get it through the House, I say in the next 10 years, and the Senate is still a problem.
Yeah. Just future, just election stuff right now. I want to talk about some of your stances still on Democratic Party relating to it. We all know it's primary season right now. The Republicans just finished up their first debate. Democrats seem that looks like they're not having debates this year. They have other candidates like Marianne Williamson and Kennedy, and a lot of people probably just don't know their candidates or just don't know what they have to say. Democrats are doing their best to show it out for Joe Biden, throwing all this money for him. I've said before, Americans don't want Joe Biden. He's a very unpopular president. So, what is your stance on just Democratic Party just not showing out for their candidates and not letting, people like Mary Williamson, which she's overall showing as a progressive. She's ran before, lost. She's not doing very good in the polls right now. Kennedy is outdoing her, which I think is sad. But what is your stance on just that overall, the Democratic Party just shoving out candidates?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the Democratic Party is not the most small
Mm-hmm.
d Democratic. I mean, you look at even within Congress, the Democratic chairs are allowed to sit in their chairmanships much longer than the Republican Party. They basically, the Republican Party has self-imposed term limits on their congressional chairs. Democrats don't have that. You can be the chair of a congressional committee for 30 or 40 years if you want. And it's just not very democratic. It doesn't give people an opportunity to rise up the ranks, to get experiences in leadership. And when it comes to the debates and the primary, as a Bernie Sanders supporter, I've seen it twice now where the Democratic Party is not so much in favor of a real marketplace of ideas. They believe their politics is skittish, right? I've been saying this consistently. So they believe that any challenge to their um, desired candidate is room for loss, right? It's not room to strengthen that candidate. It's not room to strengthen ideas. And so they try to shut that out. And I think it's a horrible philosophy. Now, does that mean I want to join the Republican Party? No. And then does that mean that I want to champion a third party? I think that's a much harder question because it's so hard to do in this two-party system. I mean, our two-party system is in our founding documents, right? So it's a hard kind of quagmire to break. So
Yeah.
I'm not a Republican, and I don't think the third parties have the engagement to break through the two-party lock on our system. And so when it comes to how I want to best utilize my voice and vote, I am a Democrat. Now, do I agree with everything that Democrats do? Certainly not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I share these same frustrations. I share these same disappointments. But that is how our party operates. And until we do more things to infiltrate, like in Nevada, and the thing is, it's not just infiltrate. We have to be prepared for the offices we seek and for the leadership positions we seek as well. Because what happened in Nevada is, our progressives, brother and sisters, took over and they had no plan and we're not really prepared. And so then the establishment came right back in and took it over, and so we have to challenge the establishment, but we have to do it from a place of preparation and purpose. And so, we have to have a plan when we do it and execute and get in office a lot more like-minded people, because what we know the Democratic Party that we are operating with, they are very centrist, they are very skittish, but we can change it because these parties
Mm-hmm.
are made of people. And so it's up to us to actually organize and to fix it, because the Democratic Party was not always this way. This is a modern phenomenon from the 90s until now. But the
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party of past, you know, gave us Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, like huge social programs and huge safety nets within our, government resources. So the Democratic Party that we're fighting now. It did not always look like this. And I am, when it comes to my belief system, much more of the Democrats of the past who really fought for workers and poor people.
Yeah, it's you bring up a lot of third party like problems. I myself have worked with third party stuff. I do with the Green Party, Ohio Green Party. I've worked with them stuff in the past. Communicate with them. I'm a co-chair for one of their caucuses for Ohio. But do you think that, Ohio and Democratic parties working together to even get third parties off the ballot, they have raised things to keep people like the Green Party and Libertarian Party off the ballot. So these are just issues. Do you think that the Democrats should do better to let these people on the ballot?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it doesn't, it shows the weakness of the challenger,
Mm-hmm.
the weakness of the champion to hamstring the challenger, right? And I consider Democrats the champion because they are one of the two parties. And so when we're talking about the Green Party or the Socialist Party or your Democratic Socialist, it to me it looks bad on the Democrats to always punch down.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with that. I do agree that they should let these people into primaries, let them on debate stages, and actually have the debate, defend your ideas, and win on merit, and not because you have rigged the game. And so, that is one of my consistent disappointments with the Democratic Party, and that is that they play the same game that the Republicans play,
Mm-hmm.
and Republicans gerrymander, Democrats gerrymander. And it's just it is it when it comes to the gamesmanship of politics, all parties are guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see third parties strengthened to a way where they actually can engage on the same level. Because I believe in real debates and really hashing out ideas, and I do, like I said, I have the support of the Democratic Socialists. I have friends in the Green Party. I have helped organize with the Green
Mm-hmm.
Party. But when it comes to elections, the organization is just not there yet. It's great for a market. It's great to have the ideas. It's great to stand out as to the left of the Democratic Party. But when it comes to engaging in elections, it's just not there. And it's because, as you mentioned, the Democratic Party is able to manipulate
Mm-hmm.
the system. And so we have to out organize that. And that is really, really, really hard work.
Yeah, I want to take it back to just Dayton and Ohio for time's sake. College tuition has become a big issue now, with the recent debacles in politics discussing the budget. They've gutted a lot of the a lot of social programs, but let's talk about college tuition just directly. Payments are starting back up again this month. So, what is your take on that, and what can we do in the city of Dayton to make sure college is more affordable for the people living in Dayton? Because we have, the community college Sinclair, we have UD, there's Wright State, even though it's in Beaver Creek. Maybe there's some way we can help, Dayton, the people of Dayton who go to Wright State get cheaper tuition. So what can you do and commission to help these people?
So, this is another area where I would love to work collaboratively to just end tuition um, and allow tuition free colleges and universities. Now, Sinclair is an amazing school, and I think we need to be cognizant of our more affordable options for education. A lot of times we want to go after that 4-year degree. But like to your point, they're really expensive now. So I think we have a great resource in Sinclair. They just had one of their largest graduating classes. I think people are catching on that is a really affordable way to progress your career, progress your
Mm-hmm.
education, and keep it affordable. So I would love to see, more people utilizing Sinclair Community College, because I think it's a, well, number one, it's nationally recognized community college, but it is affordable, and
Yeah.
it is a way to secure a solid education, a solid career, and make a living.
Yeah, because
Now, when it comes to help with tuition at 4-year universities, I just think we need to see more grants and resources like that are specifically allocated towards helping people with tuition. And so I would like to see some city programs that help get rid of, number one, the student debt that people are holding on to. Like you said, the payments are restarting soon. I would like to see, maybe programs where if people do a certain amount of volunteering or a certain amount of service with the city, we can help alleviate your student loan burden. And then when it comes to the cost of, new education, we're going to need some state funding, some federal funding to lower the cost of
Yeah.
tuition, and help these universities out. They are strapped. Now, COVID hurt a lot of universities because of enrollment, and so our universities are still digging out of that hole. But there are ways to be collaborative and
Mhm.
increase enrollment, which could in turn lower costs for going to school. You have more students, you can lower the cost. But our schools are challenged right now with low enrollment, because it's expensive, and people are opting to go to community college or to trade schools, and so just there's a host of issues that are contributing to the problem. But from the city commission, I would love to be collaborative and get some assistance for people who want to go to school and the ones who already have and are burdened by student loan debt.
Yeah, cause I went to high school and the like well it's Riverside. I went to Stebbins. We have programs with Sinclair and Wright State to do college prep. So I did a bunch of Sinclair classes there. It's a great school. Although I'm in LA right now paying like 40K a year to be here, but it's with all the loans I'm to paying back like I'm paying back so much. But I want to talk about minimum wage. Even here in California, different cities have their own minimum wages. I don't think Dayton has its own wage. I see, a lot of people paying like working for $12 an hour. Here in LA, it's minimum wage here is 16. Do you think we can have like a city, like a local minimum wage where we can set it above the state?
So that's what I was saying about issue one coming back, because right now state law bars municipalities from raising their own wage.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland tried to do it. Ohio State Republicans jumped in and said you cannot raise your minimum wage as a city, as a municipality, and so we would have to amend that law or our state constitution to say that cities can raise their minimum wage as they see fit. And so that's some critical work and organizing that I want to do from the city commission and say, Dayton needs higher wages. We need to repeal that law or amend our state constitution to say that Dayton can raise its minimum wage. And then I would love to work on that ordinance saying that if you are employing people within the city of Dayton, this is the minimum. And to me, $15 is too low.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about investing $1.5 billion into our downtown center, this is not a city that is for poor people. So we need to pay people what it costs to live here. And so I'm thinking for Ohio, $17-$18 an hour minimum wage, but that we will research and plan accordingly. But I would love to do that organizing to repeal that state law or amend our state constitution and then and raise our minimum wage here in Dayton. We have to. It's really the only answer.
Yeah, even like here in LA, 60 obviously 16 like 48 is not enough. That's my minimum wage as a student worker on campus. Um, it's just like people we got rent rising. I don't even think 17 would be enough. We got rent in Ohio is just hitting thousands of dollars now. My sister was paying $1,000 for her like almost $2,000 for her rent. So it's crazy to see that we couldn't get even 15 in the past 20 years I've been alive. I'll be 21 next month. So
Mhm.
it's crazy.
And of course, raising the federal minimum wage would help, and
Yeah.
we should advocate for that too.
Hmm. So that was the last question. I don't want to waste your time. I know you're a busy man yourself.
Mhm.
Thank you for coming. I don't want
Thanks
to
for the
bother you
invite.
anymore. No problem. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.